The stars above SCIFI-Prime burned cold and distant, reflected in the metal towers that reached miles into the sky. The great capital of the Zyrith Empire was silent that day. Every soldier, servant, and noble gathered around the royal hall, waiting to witness something that had never happened in their long history. A human was coming to marry their queen. Queen Valara sat on her high throne made of dark crystal. Her armor shone with silver light, and her tall insectoid body was still as a statue. Her 6 golden eyes blinked slowly, showing no emotion. She was the most feared ruler in 3 sectors of the galaxy. Her claws could crush metal, her mind could command fleets, and her voice could silence 1,000 soldiers. But today, she felt something strange. Doubt. Her advisors whispered behind her. "This is madness," hissed General Karath, a soft-skinned creature from a death world. Barely 2 meters tall. He cannot even breathe our air for long. Valara ignored him. She looked at the hollow screen showing the approaching human ship. "Captain Marcus Hale," she said softly, tasting the strange name. "War hero of Earth, survivor of the Battle of Titan Rift, perhaps. Not as soft as you think." Still, even she did not believe this alliance would work. The marriage was only a symbol, a political deal to end the border wars between humans and the Zyrith. The High Council had suggested it to show peace. The Queen had agreed out of duty, not desire, but when the human ship landed and the airlock opened, the entire hall went silent. Marcus Hale walked forward in a formal dark uniform. He was tall for a human, but compared to the towering Zyrith, he looked small and fragile. His face was calm, his eyes steady and blue. He did not wear armor, did not carry a weapon, only a simple silver band on his hand, the human sign of marriage. The guards whispered, clicking their mandibles in disbelief. "That is a warrior," one said. "He looks like a child." But Marcus kept walking. He did not flinch at their size or their sharp claws. When he reached the Queen, he bowed deeply and said, "Your Majesty, I am honored to meet you. I come not as a conqueror or a subject, but as a partner." Valara studied him. His voice was firm. His eyes met hers without fear. He was smaller, weaker, and yet, something about him did not seem fragile. There was a quiet strength there, a still flame behind his calm face. "You understand this marriage is a political act," Valara said coldly. "You will live among my people, follow our rules, and represent your kind. Do you agree to this, human?" Marcus smiled slightly. "If it brings peace between our worlds, I agree to anything." The ceremony was brief. The Zyrith priests recited their old oaths, and Marcus repeated them in careful tones. When it was over, the hall clapped their claws together, a sharp, echoing sound that filled the air, and just like that, humanity and the Zyrith Empire were joined by marriage. Life in the royal palace was not easy for Marcus. The air was thicker, the food strange, and the culture even stranger. The Zyrith had no concept of humor, warmth, or rest. Everything was discipline and duty. They called emotions a weakness. They believed mercy was for the weak. Every day Marcus felt their eyes on him. The nobles watched him with disgust. The guards laughed quietly when he passed. "Look," one whispered. "The Queen's pet walks again." But Marcus never reacted. He ate their food even when it made him sick. He trained his body to handle their gravity. And every day he smiled politely and kept his head high. He didn't argue, didn't shout. He just worked quietly, learning their language and customs. One night, as Valara reviewed reports in her chamber, she received a message. Pirates had attacked a Zyrith trade vessel near the outer rim. The distress call said civilians were trapped in the cargo bay. Before she could even issue orders, Marcus appeared at the command bridge in his small human flight suit. "You cannot go," Valara said sharply. "That is a war zone," Marcus replied simply. "Then it's a good place for a soldier." The Queen hesitated. "You are not one of my warriors." "No," Marcus said. "But they're people, aren't they?" She had no words. For the first time in years, someone had spoken to her like that. Not with rank or fear, but with simple honesty. Minutes later, Marcus's shuttle launched into the void. The pirate ship was twice the size of a shuttle. Plasma fire burned across space and explosions lit the darkness. The Zyrith ship was crippled, its engines failing. Marcus flew through the wreckage, dodging debris until he found a docking point. He entered the trade vessel through a damaged airlock. Inside, fire and smoke filled the corridors. The Zyrith civilians, smaller than the warrior classes, were trapped behind fallen metal. Marcus didn't hesitate. He pulled at the debris with his bare hands, ignoring the heat that burned his skin. His helmet cracked, his oxygen dropped, but he kept moving. When one of the alien children screamed, he used his body to shield her from falling debris. "Go," he shouted through the comms. "Get them out." The Zyreth rescue team watched in disbelief as the human dragged 3 civilians through a corridor full of fire. His suit was torn, blood on his face, but he refused to stop. When they finally returned to the palace, the story had already spread. The weak human had saved 23 Zyreth lives without armor, without weapons. The nobles were silent that evening. Even General Karath bowed his head. Queen Valara stood by the window of her private chamber, watching the stars. She could not stop thinking about what had happened. Why had he done it? The civilians were not his people. No reward, no duty, nothing forced him to risk his life. She heard the door open. Marcus entered, limping slightly, his arm in a medical wrap. "Your Majesty," he said quietly, "the civilians are safe." "You disobeyed orders," Valara said coldly. "You could have died." He smiled tiredly. "Maybe, but if peace means anything, it must protect the innocent. Otherwise, what's the point?" Valara turned to look at him fully for the first time. He stood there, battered, burned, and smiling. No armor, no power, yet something about him filled the room stronger than any Zyreth general she had ever known. "Humans," she said softly. "You risk your lives for strangers. You fight without reason. You burn like stars that die too fast." Marcus laughed a little. "Maybe that's what makes us human, Your Majesty. We don't measure life by how long it lasts, but by what we do with it." For the first time in her rule, Valara felt something she hadn't in centuries: respect. Maybe even admiration. She dismissed him with a nod, but after he left, she found herself staring at the stars again. This human, this small, fragile being, had shown more courage than any warrior of her race. Days turned into weeks. The palace began to change. The guards who once mocked Marcus now greeted him with respect. The servants brought him human-style food. Even the general started listening to his ideas during meetings. He began training some of the younger Zyreth soldiers. He didn't have their strength, but he showed them how to move faster, how to use their environment, how to think rather than charge. "Brains before brawn," he told them, grinning. It's a human thing. They didn't understand at first. But when he defeated a much larger opponent using only speed and clever tricks, they began to learn. Valara watched one of these sessions from the balcony. Her eyes followed his movements, precise, calm, focused. The laughter in his voice when the young guards fell on their faces. The kindness when he helped them back up. The queen realized she had not heard laughter in her palace for years. That night, when she met Marcus for dinner, the silence between them was comfortable. She finally asked, "Why did you accept this marriage?" "You could have refused. You could have stayed on your world," Marcus smiled. "Because I believe peace is worth fighting for. And maybe I was curious. Everyone told me aliens were monsters. I wanted to see for myself." Valara tilted her head. "And what do you think now?" He looked at her, his expression soft. "I think they were wrong." For a long moment, neither spoke. Only the hum of the palace filled the air. Valara, the cold queen of the Zyreth, felt something she never expected: warmth. She ended the dinner early, but as she walked back to her chamber, she realized something important. The human she married for politics might change not just her empire, but her heart. The sun of GalacticPrime burned orange across the sky as the capital came alive with sound and movement. The empire was still adjusting to peace, but something had changed since the human arrived. The palace no longer felt as cold or silent as before. The guards spoke with pride, the servants smiled more, and the air itself seemed lighter, all because of one small human, Captain Marcus Hale. Queen Valara noticed it too. Her court used to fear her shadow, but now they whispered about the queen's human. Some even admired him. He had brought something strange and powerful to her people: hope. Still, many nobles were unhappy. They called him a distraction, a weak creature who made the queen soft. But Valara ignored them. She had seen what Marcus could do with her own eyes. The courage in him was not weakness. It was strength of a kind her people had forgotten. Every morning Marcus woke before sunrise and trained in the courtyard. He could not match the strength of the Zyreth warriors, so he trained with speed, balance, and awareness. He practiced human martial arts, smooth movements, fast strikes, careful dodges. Some guards would watch from a distance, laughing at first, then watching more seriously as he moved with sharp control. After a few days, Valara ordered that the young palace guards join him in training. Marcus smiled when he heard the news. "Your Majesty," he said, "I thought you didn't believe in my strange human methods." "I don't," Valara replied, her tone calm but her eyes shining faintly. "But I want to see if they work." The first training was chaos. The young Xyrath guards charged like beasts, confident in their size and power. Marcus barely moved, just sidestepped, ducked, and let their own force make them fall. Within minutes, half the guards were lying on the ground, tangled in their own arms. Marcus grinned. "Rule 1 of human fighting," he said. "The smartest fighter wins, not the biggest." The guards laughed nervously, rubbing their bruises. Even Valara, watching from the balcony, felt something like amusement stir in her chest. His way was so different, clever, calm, creative. It was human. Days passed and the training grew serious. Marcus taught them ambush tactics, teamwork, and how to fight using environment. Cover, angles, light. He called it thinking combat. The Xyrath had never fought like that before. They were used to raw power and intimidation. Now they began to move faster, plan smarter. The Queen's army was slowly learning the human way. Valara watched their progress closely. She was impressed, though she didn't admit it. When Marcus spoke about human history, she listened quietly. About wars on Earth, how humans fought against stronger enemies and still survived through willpower and strategy. "Your people are strange," Valara said one day as they walked through the palace garden. "You destroy your world, fight among yourselves, and yet, you never give up." Marcus chuckled softly. "Yeah, we're stubborn like that. We don't always do things right, but when we fight for something we care about, we don't stop. Ever." Valara tilted her head. "Even when death is certain?" He looked up at the alien sky. "Especially then." For a long moment, the Queen said nothing. His words stayed in her mind long after he left. One evening, Valara held a diplomatic dinner for alien ambassadors. It was the first major event since the marriage. Nobles from across the Empire attended, along with representatives from neutral worlds. The hall was filled with alien voices, metallic music, and light from glowing crystals. Marcus stood beside the Queen, dressed in a formal Xyrath uniform modified for his human frame. He felt hundreds of eyes on him, but he stood straight, calm and polite. As the event continued, an ambassador from the Tarl Dominion, a rival species, raised a glass and said mockingly, "I see the mighty Xyrath Queen now keeps a pet from the human world." The hall fell silent. The insult was open and cruel. All eyes turned to Valara, waiting for her reaction. Before she could speak, Marcus smiled politely. "Not a pet," he said softly. "More like a reminder." The ambassador frowned. "Reminder of what?" Marcus met his gaze. "That peace is earned through courage, not fear, and that even small creatures can change the stars." The alien's expression darkened. The hall murmured, but Valara's eyes glowed faintly with approval. She said nothing, but the corners of her mouth curved slightly upward, the closest she ever came to a smile. After the dinner, as they walked back to the throne room, Valara spoke. "You handled that well," Marcus shrugged. "He wanted to make me angry. I prefer to make people think instead." She glanced at him. "That is a very human way." The next morning everything changed. An explosion rocked the royal palace. Alarms blared. Guards rushed through corridors. Smoke filled the air. The Queen's private chamber was under attack. Marcus was in the training hall when he heard the blast. Without hesitation, he grabbed a plasma pistol from a fallen guard and sprinted toward the smoke. He found 3 assassins, cloaked, fast-moving Xyrath rebels, fighting through the guards near the Queen's door. They shouted about purity and no place for humans. Marcus didn't wait for backup. He charged straight in. He rolled under a plasma bolt, fired once, hit the first assassin in the leg. The second slashed at him with an energy blade, but Marcus ducked, grabbed a fallen spear and blocked the attack. Sparks flew. He spun and kicked the attacker backward, human reflexes against alien strength. The third assassin aimed a blaster at the Queen's chamber door. Marcus shouted, "No!" and dove forward, taking the shot in his shoulder. Pain shot through him like fire, but he didn't stop. He tackled the assassin to the ground and smashed the blaster aside. By the time the guards arrived, 2 rebels were down, and Marcus was bleeding badly, half-conscious. The Queen stepped out, her eyes wide with shock. "Human," she said quietly, kneeling beside him. "You are hurt." He smiled weakly. "Only a little. You're safe. That's what matters." Valara looked at the blood on her claws, his blood. For a long time, she didn't move. Around her, her soldiers bowed in silence. None of them had reacted as fast as the human had. Later, in the royal medbay, Valara stood beside Marcus's bed as the doctors treated him. "Why did you do it?" she asked softly. "You could have died." Marcus, half awake, whispered, "You're my partner. And my friend. That's reason enough." Those words stunned her more than the attack itself. No one had ever called her a friend, not in her entire reign. Days passed as Marcus healed. Valara visited him every night, though she told no one. She would sit beside his bed, reading reports quietly while he slept. Once, when he woke up and smiled weakly, she almost smiled back. When he finally recovered, she called for a meeting of her generals. In front of the entire war council, she said, "This human saved your queen. His courage and tactics are now part of our training doctrine. His way, the human way, will be taught across the Empire." The room was silent. Then General Karath stepped forward and bowed. "As you command, my queen." From that day, human-style combat became part of the Zereth military training. The guards who once laughed at Marcus now trained under him with respect. One night, after a long session in the courtyard, Marcus and Valara stood together on the palace balcony. Below them, the city lights spread like a sea of fire. "You've changed them," Valara said softly. "I didn't mean to," Marcus replied. "I just showed them another way." "The human way," she said thoughtfully. "Your kind may be small, but your hearts are enormous. You act with emotion, with passion. We do not understand it." Marcus looked at her. "Maybe it's because we have less time. We live short lives, so we feel everything stronger. We fight harder, love deeper. Every day matters." Valara's golden eyes glowed faintly in the starlight. "That sounds painful," he smiled sadly. "Sometimes it is, but it's also beautiful." For a long moment, the Queen said nothing. The cool night wind brushed between them, carrying the faint hum of the city. She felt something unfamiliar again, warmth, calm, and a strange ache she could not explain. As Marcus turned to leave, she said quietly, "Captain Hale." He stopped. "Yes, Your Majesty?" She looked at him, her eyes soft. "You are not what I expected," he smiled faintly. "Neither are you." Valara watched him walk away, his human form small against the massive halls of her empire. And yet, somehow he felt larger than life. She had ruled for centuries, commanded armies, and crushed rebellions. But this one human had done what no warrior ever could. He had changed her heart. The galaxy was quiet, too quiet. For months, reports had come from the outer colonies. Mining stations going dark, patrol ships disappearing, whole worlds silenced overnight. At first, the Zereth Council ignored them. They said it was rebellion or human error. But soon, even the bravest captains refused to travel near the edge of the galactic rim. Something terrible was coming. Queen Valara stood before the giant holomap in her war chamber. Red lights marked the missing systems. Whole sectors were vanishing. Around her stood her generals and advisors, all silent, their mandibles clicking nervously. Marcus Hale entered the room, wearing his dark uniform and a serious expression. The council members still looked at him with a mix of respect and unease. The human had become a hero in their empire, the one who saved their queen and reshaped their training. But now even his courage was tested. Valara turned to him. "The scouts call them the Krill," she said. "Machines. No flesh, no emotion. They consume every world they touch. They move like a storm that never stops." Marcus studied the holomap. "Has anyone tried communicating?" "They do not speak," Valara said. "They only destroy." The room fell silent again. Marcus looked around at the generals. "Then we prepare. If they can bleed, we fight. If they can't, we find a way to make them bleed anyway." Some of the generals made low, disapproving sounds. General Karath stepped forward. "You speak boldly, human, but we do not fight what we cannot defeat." "The Krill are endless," Marcus met his gaze. "Then we fight until we can't stand. That's what humans do." The Queen's golden eyes flickered with light. She felt something inside her, a pride. "He is right," she said firmly. "We will not surrender." The Zyreth fleets began to gather. Across the Empire, warships powered up, soldiers trained, and new strategies were planned. This time Marcus was not a spectator, he was one of the leaders. His human-style tactics had proven effective, and Valara trusted his mind more than any other. He spent long nights studying the enemy data, drawing patterns and marking weak points. He used ideas from Earth wars, guerrilla tactics, ambush lines, and psychological tricks. The Zyreth commanders didn't always understand, but Valara backed him every step. One evening, Marcus stood alone on the balcony, watching the city lights. The Queen joined him quietly. "You have not rested in 3 days," she said. He smiled faintly. "Hard to rest when you know what's coming." "You fear them?" she asked. He shook his head. "No, but I fear what will happen if we give up before the fight even begins." Valara studied his face. She could see exhaustion and pain, yet also fire. That strange human fire that refused to die. "You are strange creatures," she said softly. "You know fear, yet you never let it stop you." Marcus looked at her. "That's what courage is. Doing it anyway." For a moment, neither spoke. The alien queen and the human soldier stood side by side, staring at the stars that might soon burn in war. Weeks later, the first attack came. The Krill entered Zyreth space without warning. Thousands of ships, black as shadows, moved through the stars like a swarm of nightmares. Their weapons glowed white-hot, cutting through everything in their path. The first battle took place above the colony of Miran V. Valara commanded the fleet from her flagship, Eternal Flame. Marcus stood beside her, coordinating tactics. When the Krill appeared on sensors, even the battle-hardened Zyreth generals hesitated. The enemy ships were huge, shaped like twisted claws with no visible bridges or engines, just dark machines that pulsed with cold light. "Open fire," Valara commanded. The space lit up with plasma fire and missiles. Explosions shook the void. But the Krill ships didn't break formation. They advanced silently, absorbing the damage, adapting their shields, and striking back. Zyreth cruisers exploded one after another. The screams of the crews filled the comm channels. "Fall back," shouted one of the captains. "They are unstoppable." Marcus slammed his hand on the console. "No! If we retreat now, they'll take the planet. We hold the line." Valara looked at him sharply. "You would sacrifice them?" "I would save them," he said. "If they die running, it's for nothing. If they die fighting, the civilians have time to escape. We can't win this battle, Blay, but we can make it cost the Krill something." She hesitated only for a second. Then she nodded. "All fleets, defensive formation Delta. Follow the humans' lead." Marcus gave new orders, unpredictable maneuvers, quick bursts, coordinated fire on single targets. The Krill ships started taking damage. Small victories, but they mattered. Then a massive blast shook the flagship. Sparks flew, alarms blared. The shields were failing. "Power to engines," Marcus shouted. "We're pulling them away from the colony." Valara gripped the command chair tightly. "Marcus, if we move closer, they'll focus on us." "That's the plan," he said with a grin. "Make them chase the flagship. Give the civilians a chance." The Queen stared at him, this fragile, reckless human, and realized that her heart was beating faster than it had in centuries. Hours later, the fleet managed to retreat. Miran V was saved, but the cost was heavy. Hundreds of ships were lost, thousands dead. The Krill withdrew for now, their swarm drifting back into the dark. In the quiet aftermath, Valara sat alone in her chamber. The war had begun and her empire was trembling. She had ruled for centuries, seen rebellions and invasions, but this was different. The Krill were not enemies that could be reasoned with. They were death itself. Her thoughts were interrupted when Marcus entered, still in his damaged uniform, smoke stains on his face. He bowed slightly. "Your Majesty, we held them off." "You risked everything," she said. "You defied orders," he smiled faintly. "You should be used to that by now." She wanted to scold him, but instead she found herself walking closer. "You could have died." "I almost did," he admitted. "But if I had to choose between my life and thousands of innocent ones, I'd make the same choice again." Valara's eyes softened. "You are a fool." "Probably," Marcus said, smiling. "But I'm your fool. For the first time, the Queen laughed in a quiet, strange sound. It startled even her. In the weeks that followed, Marcus became a legend among both humans and Xyrith. Soldiers repeated his words before every mission. If we run, there will be no galaxy left to return to. His strategies spread quickly. Fleets learned to use deception, stealth, and unpredictability, human creativity in alien hands. The Krill began losing small battles and hope returned, but with every victory came a new loss. Entire systems still fell to the machines, and every time Marcus looked at the casualty lists, he felt the weight of command press harder on his chest. One night, he stood alone in the observation deck, staring at the stars. Valara joined him quietly. "You are tired," she said. He nodded. "I am, but I can't stop." "Not while they're still out there." "You cannot fight forever," she said. "Even humans have limits." He turned to her. "Maybe, but I haven't found mine yet." Valara looked at him, at the small, fragile creature who had stood against an endless storm, and for the first time, she felt fear. Not for her empire, but for him. She didn't want to lose him. Days later, the Krill returned, stronger, faster, deadlier. The second invasion began across 3 sectors at once. Valara and Marcus led the defense together. He was everywhere, in the command center, on the front lines, coordinating fleets and rescue operations. During one battle, the enemy broke through their lines. The Queen's ship came under fire. Explosions rocked the bridge. Alarm screamed. "Shields failing," shouted a technician. "Eject the core," Marcus yelled, but it was too late. A Krill drone pierced the hull, tearing through steel. The blast threw everyone to the floor. When Valara opened her eyes, she saw smoke, fire, and Marcus dragging her toward the escape pod. "Go," he shouted over the noise. She tried to push him away. "No, I will not leave." He grabbed her shoulders. "You have to. The Empire needs you. If you die here, it's over. Then we die together," she snapped. Marcus smiled faintly, blood dripping from his lip. "That's not the human way, Your Majesty. We keep fighting, even if it means fighting alone." He shoved her into the pod and slammed the hatch before she could stop him. The last thing she saw was his face, calm, determined and unbreakable, before the door closed and the pod launched into space. Moments later, her ship exploded behind her. When rescue teams found her, she was silent. The galaxy believed Marcus Hale was dead. The humans mourned. The Xyrith held ceremonies in his honor. The man they once mocked was now the symbol of courage, but Queen Valara refused to accept his death. She sat in her dark throne room, her claws tightening around the human ring he once wore. "No," she whispered to herself. "He's not gone. Humans don't die that easily." And deep inside, she felt something else. A fire growing stronger. For the first time, the galaxy's cold queen burned with vengeance. The war was far from over. The war had changed everything. The once proud Xyrith Empire, feared across the stars, now fought for its survival. Entire systems burned under the cold advance of the Krill machine swarm, leaving nothing but metal dust and silence behind. But among the fear and ruin, one small light refused to die. That light was human. It was Marcus Hale. Every day, Marcus stood inside the strategy hall beside Queen Valara. Massive holograms of burning planets surrounded them. Alien generals argued over tactics, their deep voices echoing across the chamber. "We cannot win. Their numbers are infinite," shouted one. "Retreat to the core worlds," said another. Marcus listened silently. His human face looked calm, but his eyes carried the sharp focus of a soldier who had seen too much death. Finally, he spoke. "If we keep retreating, there won't be a core world left to defend," he said firmly. "We must fight them where they least expect it." The generals turned toward him, their large insectoid eyes blinking in disbelief. One sneered. "You are human. You don't understand the scale of this war." Marcus looked straight into the alien's eyes. "Maybe I don't, but I understand what happens when you give up and you lose everything." The room went silent. Valara's gaze softened slightly. She had seen this look before, that unbreakable human will that frightened and inspired her at the same time. "Let him speak," Valara ordered. "Human or not, he has earned that right." Marcus stepped forward and pointed to the holographic map. "The Krill depend on control. They think like machines, predictable, logical. We must be chaos to them, hit their supply lines, confuse their command systems, and make them doubt their own code." The generals murmured. "It was reckless. It was impossible. But it was human, and somehow it made sense. Valara stood beside him. "Then we will fight as humans do," she declared. "We will fight with spirit." Days later, Marcus led his first joint operation. A fleet of human and Zereth ships jumped into a Krill-controlled system. The machines reacted instantly, thousands of drones forming a deadly wall of metal. But Marcus had planned for that. "Scatter the formation," he ordered. "Draw them out." The humans used unpredictable flight patterns, while the Zereth ships, guided by human tactics, split into smaller strike teams. Chaos filled the stars. The Krill tried to adapt, but they couldn't. Their code wasn't built for madness. The battle turned in their favor. For the first time, the machines retreated. Valara watched the victory from her command ship. Her heart swelled with something she had never felt before: hope. When Marcus returned from the battle, covered in dust and exhaustion, the entire bridge crew saluted him. Even the proud Zereth warriors bowed their heads. "You brought us victory, human," one said. Marcus shook his head. "We brought it together." Valara smiled softly. She realized then how much he had changed them all. Weeks passed. The war raged on, but everywhere Marcus went, morale rose. Soldiers painted human slogans on their armor: "Never surrender, one heart, one fight." The Queen often found herself watching him, not as an ally, but as something deeper. When he spoke, she listened. When he fought, she felt pride, but the Krill were learning. Their attacks became faster, more focused. Soon, their scanners discovered the location of the Zereth capital world, SciFi-Prime. If it fell, everything would end. A council meeting was called. The generals wanted to defend the capital directly, but Marcus disagreed. "No," he said. "That's what they expect. We need to strike first, take out their control ship." Valara frowned. "That's deep inside their fleet, Marcus. A suicide mission." "I know," he replied quietly. "But if we destroy it, we can stop the swarm." The Queen's voice softened. "You would die for that?" Marcus looked at her with calm eyes. "I'd die to give others a chance to live. That's what humans do." Valara turned away, her chest tightening. She had faced death 100 times before, but the thought of losing him filled her with a fear she didn't understand. "Then I'm going with you," she said finally. He smiled faintly. "Your people need you here. And who will need me if you are gone?" She whispered. For a long moment they stood in silence. Two souls from different worlds united by the same fire. The next day the mission began. A small strike team, half human, half Zereth, boarded a stealth ship. Their target, the Krill Command Nexus orbiting the dying sun of Drathos system. The journey was quiet. The hum of the ship was the only sound. Valara stood at the window staring at the endless black. Marcus joined her. "You should rest," he said gently. "I cannot," she replied. "My mind is heavy," he nodded. "I know the feeling." After a pause, she looked at him. "When this war ends, what will you do?" Marcus smiled sadly. "I don't think that far ahead anymore." Valara's hand, cold and alien, touched his shoulder. "Then think of now," she said softly. They stood together in silence, staring at the stars that they might never see again. When they reached the Krill Nexus, alarms blared across the alien ship. The machines detected them immediately. Metallic claws burst through the walls and beams of plasma tore through the air. "Move," Marcus shouted. His team returned fire, blasting the drones apart. Sparks rained from the ceiling. Valara fought with deadly precision, her blade slicing through steel and light. Marcus used explosives and quick traps, moving like a shadow between fire and smoke. They reached the central core, a glowing sphere pulsing with energy. "This is it," Marcus said, planting charges around it. A robotic voice echoed through the ship. "Biological life detected. Terminate." Hundreds of drones swarmed the chamber. The fight was brutal. Marcus was struck by shrapnel, but he kept fighting. His uniform burned, his skin bled, yet he didn't stop. Valara screamed his name, her voice raw. She cut through the drones to reach him. "Go!" he shouted. "I'll finish it." "No," she cried. "We do this together." But the timer was running. The explosives were armed. There was no time left. Marcus looked at her one last time. "You once told me humans were weak. But strength isn't about power. It's about why you fight." She reached for him, but the force of an explosion threw her back. A blast door sealed shut between them. Valara pounded on the metal, her voice breaking. "Marcus, Through the small window, she saw him smile faintly, a calm, brave smile. Then the light swallowed everything. When she woke, she was aboard her ship. The Krill fleet was gone. The entire machine network had collapsed. The war was over, but Marcus was gone too. Valara stood silently on the bridge, staring at the battlefield. The stars were quiet again. Her generals hailed her victory, calling her savior of the galaxy. But she didn't feel victorious. She only felt empty. She went to the observation deck and opened her hand. Inside it was a small burnt object, Marcus's insignia, found in the wreckage. She held it close to her chest. He was more than a soldier, she whispered. He was the heart of this war. In the days that followed, Valara changed. She ruled with compassion instead of fear. She created the Human-Zyrith Alliance, naming it after Marcus Hale. When alien children asked her how one human changed the fate of an empire, she always said the same words. He showed us that true strength does not come from the body, but from the heart that refuses to give up. Even years later, when peace spread across the stars, she would often stand alone at her palace balcony, looking toward the blue planet of Earth. Sometimes in the silence of the night, she could almost hear his voice, calm, brave, unbreakable. The galaxy was quiet. For the first time in centuries, GalacticPrime could breathe without alarms. The war against the Krill had ended. Planets once lost were being rebuilt. Trade resumed. The stars were no longer filled with the cold hum of endless machines. But Queen Valara's heart was not at peace. The battle had been won, but the man who had led them through it, the human who had taught her people courage, strategy, and heart, was gone. Marcus Hale was dead. Or so everyone believed. The Queen stood on the balcony of her palace, staring at the horizon. Ships flew past carrying supplies and reconstruction crews. Soldiers walked the streets, their armor marked with the slogans Marcus had inspired. Never surrender. Courage defines us. Valara touched the small insignia in her hand, the burnt metal token Marcus had left behind during the last mission. She traced its edges gently. It was the only thing she had of him. He was not just human, she whispered to the empty sky. He was everything we lacked. Her mind flashed back to the battles, the council meetings, the moments when Marcus had stood fearless before death, teaching aliens how to fight with cleverness and heart. She remembered the time he had saved her life during the first Krill attack, dragging her away from certain death. She remembered his words, his quiet smile, and the fire in his eyes. Valara had led empires, commanded armies, and crushed entire fleets. Yet this one fragile human had changed her life more than any conquest ever could. The palace halls were alive with activity. Young cadets trained in the human ways, using speed, unpredictability, and creativity. Fleet commanders studied tactics Marcus had devised. Children painted murals celebrating his courage. Valara walked among them, observing silently. She smiled faintly as she watched a small human cadet trip over a Zyrith training dummy, then get back up and try again. Persistence, she whispered. That is what he taught us. Her advisors approached her with reports. Your Majesty, reconstruction is going faster than expected. Trade lines are restored and all systems are stable. She nodded, not looking at them. Good. But the galaxy will never forget Marcus Hale. He taught us what it means to be truly alive, to fight, to sacrifice, to love. The advisors exchanged glances. They had seen the change in their queen. She was no longer distant and cold. Something had awakened in her, something that only Marcus could have sparked. Months passed and Valara established the Hale Accord, a new galactic alliance designed to protect smaller worlds and maintain peace. Humans were now respected across the stars, not for their technology or numbers, but for their courage and spirit, their indomitable heart. Every new ambassador or soldier that came to her court heard the same story. A small human had stood against death itself, defied impossible odds, and taught the galaxy the true meaning of strength. Valara herself told the story quietly to young heirs she was now training. Marcus Hale was small, fragile, and mortal, she would say. But he fought with everything he had, and because of him, we live today. Never forget this. Strength comes not from your claws or engines, but from the courage to act when all hope seems lost. One quiet evening, Valara wandered alone through the palace gardens. The twin moons of GalacticPrime hung low, casting silver light across the crystalline flowers. She felt a familiar emptiness, the hollow ache of loss. Then, something unusual happened. A small shuttle appeared in the distance, descending toward the palace. Valara's guards immediately went on alert. The Queen herself instinctively moved toward the observation platform. The shuttle landed softly. Its doors opened, and for a moment there was silence. Then a figure stepped out. Marcus Hale. Alive. Valara's eyes widened, disbelief freezing her in place. His uniform was tattered, his face covered in scars and soot. But his eyes, and those bright, steady eyes, had met hers. You survived, she whispered. He smiled, a little crooked but real. I told you humans never give up. She ran to him, her long legs moving faster than ever. She embraced him, her alien body trembling. I thought I had lost you. You didn't lose me, he said softly. Not while there's a galaxy to protect. The reunion changed everything. The Queen and the human warrior stood together at the balcony watching the stars. She felt her heart racing, not with fear, not with duty, but with love. I underestimated you, Valara admitted quietly. I thought humans were fragile, short-lived. Weak, Marcus shook his head. Strength isn't about size or armor. It's about courage, heart, and purpose. She looked at him, truly looked at him, and realized she had believed the opposite for too long. Humans were not weak. Humans were dangerous in their persistence, unstoppable in their will, and inspiring in their sacrifice. Valara smiled faintly. You are stronger than all of us, she said. He laughed softly. You don't know the half of it. Together they oversaw the rebuilding of the galaxy. Systems once lost to the Krill were restored. Trade, education, and diplomacy flourished. Valara and Marcus worked side by side, leading with a blend of alien discipline and human creativity. The story of their partnership, the alien queen and the human hero, spread throughout the stars. Children painted murals of the battles, soldiers studied the tactics Marcus had taught, and scholars wrote volumes on the human way of thinking. And Valara, she finally allowed herself to feel something she had never felt before. She allowed herself to hope. She allowed herself to love. Years later, the Queen would look down at her young heirs. They were half human, half Zereth, a perfect blend of two worlds. She held Marcus's hand, his human warmth a constant beside her. Remember, she said softly, true strength comes from the heart, from courage, and from the will to protect those you love. Humans taught us that. Never forget it, Marcus squeezed her hand. And never forget, my queen, that together we can change the galaxy. Valara gazed at him with quiet awe. The galaxy had seen endless empires rise and fall, countless warriors and generals lead their fleets to victory or death. But the man beside her, and fragile, mortal human, had done something greater. He had changed the hearts of all who knew him, and in that moment she understood completely. The strength of a human was not measured in muscle or claws. It was measured in will, sacrifice, love, and courage. The galaxy would never forget it, and neither would she.